Hello and welcome back to Him Reads, and we're going to start the American Girl Molly stories. She is 1944. Okay, so here's Molly's friends and family. First book is Meet Molly. Chapter 1, Turnips. Molly McIntyre sat at the kitchen table daydreaming about her Halloween costume. It would be a pink dress with a long floaty skirt that would swirl when she turned and swished when she walked. There would be shiny silver stars on the skirt to match the stars in her crown. The top of the dress would be white. Maybe it would be a lovely Angora, only Molly wasn't sure they had Angora back in Cinderella's time. That's who Molly wanted to be for Halloween, Cinderella. All she had to do was 1. Talk her mother into buying the material and making the costume. 2. Find some glass slippers somewhere. And 3. Convince Linda and Susan, her two best friends, to be the ugly stepsisters. She probably talked Susan into it. As long as Susan got to wear a long dress, she wouldn't mind being a stepsister. But Linda was another story. If they were going to be fairy tale princesses, Linda would be Snow White because she had black hair just like Snow White's. Linda would want Molly and Susie to be dwarfs. Probably sleepy and grumpy, thought Molly. Well, Molly certainly felt like grumpy tonight. She looked at the clock. She had been sitting at the kitchen table for exactly 2 hours, 46 minutes, and 1, 2, 3 seconds. She had been sitting at the table, in fact, ever since 6 o'clock when Mrs. Guilford, the housekeeper, called everyone to supper. Molly had smelled trouble as soon as she walked into the kitchen. It was a heavy, hot smell, kind of like the smell of dirty socks. She sat down and saw the odd orange heap on her plate. She made up her mind right away not to eat it. "What's this orange stuff?" she asked. Mrs. Guilford turned around and gave her what Molly's father used to call the Gladys Guilford glacial glare. "Polite children do not refer to their food as stuff," said Guilford. The vegetable which you are lucky to have on your plate is mashed turnip. "I'd like to return it," whispered Molly's 12-year-old brother, Ricky. "What was that, young man?" asked Mrs. Guilford sharply. "I like to eat turnips," said Ricky, and he shoveled a forkful into his mouth. Eating turnips, or anything alive or dead, was no hardship for Ricky. If it could be chewed, Ricky would eat it. Quick as a wink, all his turnips were gone. "That rat, Ricky," thought Molly. She looked over at her older sister, Jill. Jill was putting ladylike bites of turnip into her mouth and washing them down with long, quiet sips of water. Almost all the horrible orange stuff was gone from her plate. Molly sighed. In the old days, before Jill turned 14 and got all stuck up, Molly used to be able to count on her big fuss about things like turnips. But lately, Molly had to do it all by herself. Jill was acting superior. This new grown-up Jill was a terrible disappointment to Molly. If that's what happened to be when you got to be 14, Molly would rather be 9 forever. The turnips sat on Molly's plate, getting cold. They were turning into a solid lump that oozed water. With her fork, Molly carefully pushed her meat and potatoes in the corner of her plate so not a speck of turnip would touch and ruin them. "Disgusting," she said softly. "There will be no such language used at this table," said Mrs. Guilford. "Furthermore, anyone who fails to finish her turnips will have no dessert, nor will she be allowed to leave the table until the turnips are gone." That's why Molly was still at the table, facing a forkful of cold turnips at 8:46 p.m. None of this would have happened if Dad were home, she thought. Molly touched the heart-shaped locket she wore on the thin chain around her neck. She pulled it forward and opened up to the tiny picture inside, her father's face smiling back at her. Molly's father was a doctor. When American soldiers started fighting in World War II, Dr. McIntyre joined the army. Now he was somewhere in England taking care of wounded and sick soldiers. He'd been gone for 7 months. Molly missed him every single day, but especially at dinner time. Before Dad left before the war, Molly's family never ate supper in the kitchen. They ate dinner in the dining room. Before Dad left, back before the war, the whole family always had dinner together. They laughed and talked the whole time. Now things were different. Dad was gone, and every morning Molly's mother went off to work at the Red Cross headquarters. Very often she got home too late to have dinner with the family. She spent at least an hour or every day writing to Dad. When a letter came from Dad, it was a surprise and a treat. Everyone gathered and glanced in silence while Mrs. McIntyre read the letter out loud. Dad always seemed to send special messages to each member of the family. He told jokes and drew funny sketches of himself, but didn't say which hospital he worked in or name any of the towns he visited. That wasn't allowed because of the war. And even though Dad's letters were long and funny and wonderful, they still sounded as if they came from very far away. They were not all at all like the words Dad spoke in his deep down voice that you could feel rumbling inside you and filling up the house. Molly used to be able to hear that voice even when she was up in her room doing homework. When Dad called out, "I'm home," the house seemed more lively. Everyone, even Jill, would tumble down the stairs for a big hug. Then Dad would sit in his plain old chair, cozy and warm circle of lamplight, and they'd tell him what they'd gone on to school that day. Dad's pipe smoke made the room smell of vanilla and burning leaves. Sometimes now that Dad was gone during the war, Molly would climb into that plain chair and sniff it because that vanilla smell made her feel so safe and happy, just as if Dad were home. Molly remembered the fun they used to have at the dinner table when Dad was home. He teased Jill and made her blush. He swapped jokes with Ricky and told riddles to Brad, Molly's younger brother, and he always say, "Gosh and golly, Ollie, Molly, what have you done today?" Suddenly, everything Molly had done, whether it was winning or a race or losing a multiplication bee, was interesting, important, wonderful, or not so bad at all. Dad loved to tease Mrs. Guilford too, as she carried the steaming trays out from the kitchen with lots of importance. Dad would say, "Mrs. Gladys Guilford, an advancement has been made in telling the art of cooking. Never before in the history of mankind has there been such a perfect pot roast." Mrs. Guilford beamed and bustled and served up the more perfect pot roast and mashed potatoes and gravy. She never ever served anything awful like turnips. But everything was different now because of the war. Dad was gone and Mom was busy. So Mrs. Guilford, who arrived at the dot of 7 o'clock every weekday morning of Molly's life to cook and clean, now ruled the roost more than ever. And Mrs. Guilford was doing her part to win the war. A victory garden was Mrs. Guilford's latest war effort. Last spring, she sent away for a pamphlet called Food Fights for Freedom. It explained how to start a victory garden in your own backyard. The pamphlet had a picture of vegetables lined up in front of a potato and an onion that were wearing military hats and saluting. Under the picture, it said, "Call vegetables into service." From now on, there will be no more canned vegetables in this house, Mrs. Guilford announced. The soldiers need those cans more than we do. From now on, we will grow, preserve, and eat our own vegetables. It's the least we can do for our fighting boys. All summer long, Mrs. Guilford had tended to her victory garden. She wore a stiff straw hat, Dr. McIntyre's gardening gloves, and knee-high black rubber boots. Everyone, even little Brad, had helped her. Molly had worked in the victory garden every Tuesday morning from 10 to 11 o'clock. She crawled on her hands and knees through rows of ground seedlings, pulling weeds. The rows were strict as straight as soldiers on parade. Each one was labeled with a colorful seed packet on a stake. The seed packet showed fat carrots, plump red tomatoes, and big green peas. But by fall, after months in the hot sun, the pictures on the seed packets had faded away. The packets hung on the stakes like limp white flags of surrender. Mrs. Guilford's victory garden had not been quite as victorious as she had hoped, but all the toughest vegetables had been beaten by the dry summer. The carrots were thin and wrinkled. The tomatoes were hard as nuts. The peas were brown, but that did not defeat Mrs. Guilford. Mrs. Guilford would never give up and open a tin can. She had a rather successful crop of radishes, lima beans, and turnips, so that's what they would eat. As Molly stared at the turnips on her plate, she remembered Mrs. Guilford saying, "Wasting food is not only childish and selfish, it's unpatriotic. Think of your poor father off in some strange land. Maybe he didn't have enough to eat tonight, and you turn up your nose at fresh turnips. You will not leave this table until these turnips are gone. Completely." Now it was almost 9 o'clock. It was getting cold in the kitchen. Molly was lonely. She was tired of thinking about how unpatriotic she was. She looked at the turnips, lifted a tiny full, and put them in her mouth. Just then, Ricky burst in through the kitchen swinging door. "How do you like eating old, cold, moldy brains?" he teased, and then he ran out. Molly swallowed the turnips fast, then gulped down a whole glass of water. Old, cold, moldy brains were exactly what turnips were like. She would not expect more. "Ricky, rat," she said, "I'm going to get you." She started to get up from the chair. From behind the door, Ricky chanted, "Na, na, 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 na. You can't leave the table. You haven't finished your turnips." "Ricky, stop it," yelled Molly. But Ricky was right. The turnips were still on her plate and she was stuck. To make matters worse, Molly heard her mother calling goodbye to the carpool she rode from the Red Cross headquarters. "Now Mom will be mad at me too," thought Molly. "Now she'll never make a Cinderella dress for my Halloween costume. Now everyone in the house will be mad at me for making Mom upset. And all because of these terrible turnips." Mrs. McIntyre walked in the back door, looked at Molly, looked at the plate, and knew immediately what had happened. "Well, Molly," she said, "I see we had the first turnips from the Victory Garden for our dinner tonight." "Mom," said Molly, "I hate turnips. I know I do. And Mrs. Guilford says I can't leave the table until I eat them. I'll be here until I die, because I'll never eat these. Never. I really mean it." "I see," said Molly's mother. "Do you mind if I join you for a while?" "Not until you die, of course. Just for a while till I have a cup of tea. While I'm heating up the stoves, why don't I reheat the turnips for you? They certainly don't very good when they're cold like that." "It won't help," said Molly, but Mrs. McIntyre scooped up the turnips and put them in the frying pan. "I'll just smooth out these lumps. I think we must spare a little bit of our sugar and butter rations to add to the turnips," she said to herself. "And a little cinnamon, too." Soon a delicious smell of aroma filled the kitchen. The kettle whistled, and Mrs. McIntyre made her tea. She spooned the turnips back on Molly's plate and put the plate in front of Molly. The hot steam from the turnips warmed Molly's face and clouded her glasses. She took a deep breath, raised a small forkful to her lips, and tasted it. It wasn't so bad. In fact, it was pretty good. Sweet, cinnamony, and kind of like applesauce. It felt good going down, not like the cold, moldy brains. She had another forkful. Mrs. McIntyre sat down with her tea. "When I was about your age," she said, "my mother made sardines on toast for dinner one night. Little oily dead fish on toast. I refused to eat them. Mother said I could not leave the table until the sardines were gone." Gone was exactly what she said. So when she wasn't looking, I put each sardine one by one into my napkin, and I stuck my napkin into my pocket. When my mother saw my empty plate, she was surprised, but she excused me from the table. I used to play checkers with my father every night after dinner. That night was very hard to concentrate on the game. Our two cats, Bessie and May, yelled and meowed and climbed over me. They smelled the sardines. Finally, when I had one hand on Bessie and the other on a checker, May pulled the napkin out of my pocket. The sardines spilled all over the rug. Bessie and May gobbled them up. "Oh, Mom," laughed Molly. "Oh, Molly," sighed Mrs. McIntyre. "We have to do things whether we like them or not. There aren't always cats around who'll eat the sardines." She reached across the table and brushed Molly's bangs out of her eyes. "I know the war is hard on you children, and I know you miss your father. I miss him too." "Everything is so different with Dad gone," said Molly. "Nothing is the way it used to be anymore." "The war has changed things," said Mrs. McIntyre. "But some things are still the same. Isn't Ricky still Ricky?" "He sure is," said Molly. "Still dumb old Ricky." "And you're still my Ollie Molly," said Mrs. McIntyre. "And I am still me." She gave Molly's hand a squeeze. Molly smiled. The turnips were gone. Mom was not mad. Mrs. Guilford wouldn't think that Molly was ruining her war effort. "Thanks, Mom," she said, and she gave her mother a hug. She walked carefully up the steps to bed, pretending she was wearing a long, floaty pink skirt that switched as she took each step. And that is the end of that chapter. Thanks for listening.